We tell women stories. We show how women got to where they are today. That is often to do with a career, sometimes personal lives. In this case today, it's about caregiving. And I'd love to introduce you all to Diane Chew. Diane, welcome to She Can. You are the Dementia Coach, Diane, on social media, and you are documenting your journey of being a caregiver to your husband who lives with dementia. And you do that very beautifully. And you help so many other people by doing that. You are also the founder of Simply Successful Coaching, which is something you set up before you set off on this journey as your
Yeah,
husband's caregiver. Diane, tell us a bit more about yourself.
I, my pleasure. And thank you, by the way, for this invitation. My husband and I have actually known each other for over 50 years. We met in college and have been married for over 40 at this point. And so our journey has been an interesting one because we had very different careers. He's a musician and followed a musician's life with the concomitant hours, and I was a scientist initially and worked in the corporate arena, but found a love for training and development and coaching during my corporate career. So after I left that life, I did get certified as a life and business coach and was in the process of setting up Simply Successful Coaching and Consulting. But interestingly enough, I was having a little trouble getting focused over the years. I had clients and enjoyed them, but it was like, well, am I doing women in leadership or am I doing recovery or, where am I going? Because I had so many different directions I could have chosen. And well, as often happens, what we can't do for ourselves, our creator, I refer to our creator as God, God will do for you. And in this case, my husband started to develop signs and symptoms of dementia probably close to 7 years ago, if I really add up all the clues. But for the past 3 years, I have been his full-time caregiver, and I am continuing to take care of him at home. So all of a sudden, it's like, whoa! I found my focus, and so
You
I
did.
certainly didn't start out as dementia coach Diane when I realized, what our reality, our new normal had become. But that's how it's developed. So, yep, here I am as dementia coach Diane from Simply Successful Coaching and Consulting.
Yeah, Diane, so tell us a bit more about this journey that you're on now I mean, you didn't have to, but you really decided with a lot of love that you will be the primary caregiver to the person that you have been with for over 50 years. Tell us a little bit more about that journey. That's a difficult journey, and you do it so beautifully.
Well, and thank you. And by the grace of God, it has evolved into this. 3 years ago, though, when Ben's symptoms were progressing rapidly, I was horrified. I'll be honest. I thought our lives were over. And he is living with Lewy Body Dementia. Of course, there's many, many different types. But one of the symptoms that can come with Lewy body is what they say in layman's terms is the imposter syndrome, where he didn't recognize me at all. And he would go through these periods of wanting me to get out of the house because he didn't know who I was. And so I was moving down the path of having to admit him to a facility because I had to keep leaving the house. I think I stayed in the hotel 25 times in 2022. And so I was like, I can't live like this. This is crazy. And so I was moving down that path. But it's so interesting because I surrendered to something that was heartbreaking. I didn't want to have to do that. I didn't know how I could live with my husband in a facility. But God has an interesting way of having his will work out, because it was almost like once I surrendered, things progressed to a crisis point. It did land Ben in the hospital. When he came out, I had to have full-time caregivers, and I've shared some of those details, on social media. And then I still thought I was going to have to put him into a facility because of the expense of having caregivers.
Mm.
But one thing after another, like, didn't work out. And here I am, 3 years into it, still taking care of him at home. But it was actually almost exactly a year ago, when it was after he had come out of the hospital. As I said, I had people that were helping me, but I really felt like I was bleeding money. That's the only
Mm.
description I can give it, between the caregivers, the medical expenses. I had a concierge doctor, the supplies, the medicines, the doctor's visits, the hospital bills. I was like, and we live in a house that it's just the two of us, but it's more than we probably need. But it was just, I like, uh, how am I going to do this? All this is just insane. And we fell into that, unfortunately, that zone where we didn't qualify for Medicaid, but didn't have enough money for this, for money to not be a factor. And so I was managed to break away from the house one day, and I was taking a walk, and I was trying to calculate how I could take on more of Ben's direct care.
Mm.
And because of his symptoms, I at the time I was doing about 8 hours a day with him directly. And I was thinking, how can I take on more? How could I manage maybe the overnights? I mean, I just was trying to calculate. And it was like I got a clear message. And it was like, Diane, you're thinking very constrictively. Am I a god of constriction, or am I a god of expansion?
Mm.
And I'm sitting there going like, well, what do you mean by that? What do you want me to do? Like, take on a job? But how can I expand? How can I give any more than I'm already giving? How can I do that? And the next thought that popped in my head was, well, what's the most expansive thing you can think of? And I'm like, the internet, And it's like, yeah, I think you should share your journey. And I've never had a conversation that was this clear. And it was in my mind, of course, but it was like clear messages. And so it was like, you mean like share my journey on social media? Like, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Well, I'm telling you, even though I had started, my coaching and consulting business, I think I had 2 posts on Facebook in like 10 years, because I grew up with it, Facebook being wastebook. And I confess I was very, very judgmental about social media.
Mm.
And we're very private people. And this was it was the most personal, painful experience I could think of. I was like, there's no way I can share this. First of all, I don't know how. That was my excuse. I have no idea how to do it. But really, it was because emotionally I didn't know how I could ever do it. But between June of 23 and January of 24, it kept nagging at me and pushing at me, and I couldn't let the idea go. And I was still working with my caregivers. I had tried to again go to a facility. It didn't work out again. It was like crazy. And so I thought, all right, I'm just gonna have to do this. And I started with one of my caregivers was only 19. So she was trying to show me how to do things on TikTok. It was hilarious. I took videos where I'm crying about social media. I can't stand this. I can't do this. But, one step at a time. And I did actually find a mentor to just guide me. I wanted him to do it for me, but he
Yeah.
wouldn't. He was like, nah, I'm not going to do it for you. But, I'll help you figure out a strategy. I'm like, oh. So one step at a time, I started to share. And I think our first post was my first, I say our, because it's really my journey with Ben. And I did, by the way, ask him if it was okay if we did this. Now, certainly consciously, I doubt if he had any idea what I was talking about, but I talked to his spirit constantly, every day.
Mm.
And Ben is and always will be such a loving spirit, and has always wanted to help. As a musician, he was amazing. He was so accomplished. He is so accomplished and so technically brilliant. And yet he would always want to help and bring others up to where he was. He was no gunslinger. He was the type that he could. gunsling with his guitar, but he was always wanting to help and bring music and art and beauty into the world. So I knew that if he knew that we were helping others, that he'd be perfectly fine with it.
Yeah.
So I
Diane, so
started.
it gave you a real purpose. It gave your journey, that's a very difficult journey, a real purpose because you have been unbelievably successful on social media. You've been able to create a community out of nowhere that is big and expansive and beautiful, and people really need to hear all the things you have to say, the struggles you have every day, the little wins that you have, the couple of really beautiful moments where it's about humor and it's about you and Ben, and this human side of that journey that you have from every morning to every night, and every night time. And I think it really touches people's hearts, and people need to hear it because there are so many people around the world who are on a similar journey, right? They're caregivers, they're lonely, they
Oh
have
yeah.
no help, they have no one listening to them, and they feel heard and they feel seen by you telling your journey with Ben. So tell us a little bit, where do you think has been the greatest expansion on this journey now, the documentation of your journey as with Ben, as Ben's caregiver?
uh, I would say my heart, because like many of us, I can get very stuck in my head. And even as a coach, though I loved it, in the past, I would get so excited about good concepts and be so excited about sharing good concepts. But when you have to live them, when all of a sudden a good concept is can't be just a good concept anymore and you have to live from it, all of a sudden you make that journey from your head to your heart. And the opening of my heart has been miraculous.
Hmm.
And I will say, and this is actually true of everybody, no matter who your loved one is or what they're going through. But when I got to a point where I realized that I couldn't expect anything from Ben anymore, certainly not as a partner or a lover or a friend or a man or even an adult, and the expectations truly dropped away and
Hmm.
dissolved, what was left was unconditional love.
Hmm.
And people have said to me, things like, how do you have so much patience and everything? I'm like, it's because I have absolutely no expectations.
Yeah.
And I think about the number of times in my life with my husband. I mean, as I said, we've been together since I was 18 and he was 20. So, of course, I had expectations and I would try to drop them, but it was hard to do. I had a lot of positive expectations about Ben, but a lot of negative ones too. And yet, through this experience, it was just when I realized what was really happening, they went poof, and that unconditional love was revealed. I think it was there all along, but covered over by our conditioning and the very understandable expectations we have of people in our life that play different roles. So I think my own expectations of myself are still nag at me. It was easy to drop the ones about Ben. Dropping the expectations of myself has been a more difficult journey, but it takes practice. And by sharing and really checking in with myself every day and being able to share it and having it be able to go somewhere, to have this amazing community who's willing to receive my shares, it's miraculous what it does for me. And as you said, the thing that I love about this community is that people are starting to share back, because
Yeah.
as you said, we need to be heard. Caregiving is probably the most isolating experience I can think of, and especially in dementia care, because unfortunately, there's a lot of misunderstanding about dementia. There's shame involved and embarrassment. Like, well, what if my loved one says something and I'm embarrassed? I'm like,
Mhm.
you know what? That's probably going to happen. So it really gives you a chance to just look at all the rules that we've made up about life and society and our culture and surrender them, you know.
Yeah,
So
no, that's a beautiful thing you show us, Diane, that you surrender, and in the surrender, you find this incredible expansion. And at the end, that is love, love for Ben, love for yourself, which is something that I really see by following you, that journey. You know, you come close to burnout, often, I would say.
often, yes.
Often. And so I can see you pull back, and then I can see you go in again full speed, because you get a lot back from the people then sharing with you again, and the impact when you see the impact you have. And that is a dance that we are watching as we're following you. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I thank you for describing it as a dance because that says it so beautifully. And it has so much for me to do with my mindset, on any given day. I mean, it starts with my mindset, and I can either look at this as, you know, um, my work or my play. And Ben was always after me to play. And it was hard for me to do. I took everything so seriously. And so now, when I get stuck in that work mindset, I will start to burn out.
Mm,
And when I get back into that habit of taking everything on my own shoulders, and I start to get into that dysfunctionally independent approach, then I feel the burnout coming on. And I'm grateful in a way that I've come to the brink a number of times, and I've caught myself, and or God has caught me and said, "Woo, you're about to go over the edge again. Pull back." And as you said, the encouragement I get from this community is fabulous. They're saying like, "Take care of yourself." I'm like, "Right, right, okay." Put the oxygen mask on myself first, right? And so I think, if we can all just be mindful that, first of all, caregiving is a choice. It may not feel like one. It
yeah.
may seem like we have to do it. Well, I have to take care of my mother, or I have to take care. No, actually, we don't. We have a choice. And so for me, remembering that it's a choice, and remembering that it is, as you said, a dance, and that I have something that is so much bigger than my thoughts and feelings, which I call God, who is right there with me, that
Mm,
I am never alone. And that if I'm willing, as you said, to just clear the space of whatever is, whatever my monkey mind is doing in that moment, I will get the next piece of guidance that I need, whether it's a piece of guidance for taking care of myself or Ben or my caregiver or the home, or I'll get what I need when I need it. So the burnout, as I said, is very real, but I have an intention, and I'm trusting this community to join me in this, to change the cultural paradigm about caregivers from the stressed out, burnt out caregiver that dies before their loved one does,
mm,
to someone who is elevated to the place of royalty. We're kings and queens taking care of life,
yeah. Yeah.
our life, and the life of another person, another spirit.
Yeah.
And if we can start to think of ourselves differently, and that we are worth taking care of, and we're worth putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first. And if it does mean putting your loved one in a facility, so be it. There are people that are not able to do what I'm able to do for any number of reasons. And I may not be able to do this forever. And if it gets to that point, I'm going to trust that that decision will be perfectly clear,
Yeah.
and I'll be able to move forward with integrity and
Yeah.
respect for myself.
Yeah. And honoring those points, the honor and respect for yourself and for the other person. And I've talked spoken to several caregivers now, because we as women hold so many roles in our lives, and
Oh,
whether that's being a caregiver for your husband or your sick child, or for yourself, or someone diagnosed with a life limiting disease. I think that those are all very similar life situations, and it's such
absolutely.
a hard lesson to just learn to remove the shame and the guilt from the equation, and look it squarely in the eye, and find that love that you have found also on your journey, and everything else falls away. Diane, so I'm wondering, would you like to talk a little bit about the moments that give you reprieve? How are you filling up your tank?
Certainly, um, prayer and meditation is the first thing that I do. I do it every morning. The minute I open my eyes, I connect in prayer, and I do take time to meditate because for me, I need the practice. And what I finally discovered is that meditation isn't so much for what happens when you meditate, because some of my meditations, my mind doesn't stop the whole darn time. But what it does help me to do is that throughout the day, when things are coming at me, I'm able to just sink underneath a little bit and stay in a place of peace and calm so I can make better choices for myself and others.
Yeah.
Um, I do have somebody with Ben at night. It's worth every penny because I have to sleep. And I actually have a vision of starting a fund for caregivers if they are having trouble, because of taking care of a loved one at night, that they could provide a job for somebody else to
Mm,
come and take care of their loved one at night. I mean, I'm actually providing jobs for people. That's the way I look at
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's and so um and then also I have been looking for ways, and this is still evolving, to have a life in parallel with the one that I have with Ben.
Mm,
um I have friends and family that for I hadn't seen for like a couple of years when this all first started, and I was like, no, I need that.
yeah.
And so every, maybe at least twice a month, I will set up, lunch with a friend or a family member, and that does me good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course nature, so and that's something actually I'm trying to get a little bit better at, because when I have a caregiver here, I can get into that mindset of like, oh my gosh, I'm paying somebody. Well,
Mm,
I go back to that. I have to get work done. I'm like, oh no, maybe you need to go take a walk. And
yeah.
so again, it's so much about mindset. But so filling our tank starts with saying, I'm worth it, I think, and then giving yourself time to find out what really does work for you.
Yeah. Diane, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful for you to so vulnerably and authentically share your journey with Ben, and for really inspiring so many other people, of being that glimmer of hope for them, that community that they really need in their lives. So thank you so much for what you do, and for documenting your journey so beautifully.
Well, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit more of my story. And I encourage everybody to join in to your mission. I think it's a very important one, and I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.